Presidents have moral responsibility for the life and death of millions of people. Politics, as usual, is not acceptable for the presidency. I feel entitled to make this statement because when I served in the Senate during the Vietnam War, I spoke truth to power. I officially released the Pentagon Papers, and as a result, Richard Nixon sued me all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. I successfully filibustered to force the end of the military draft. I filibustered alone and with others to end the appropriations for the Vietnam War. Those are my credentials. I've been there, and I know how hard it is to oppose the majority of your peers. I ask that you hold other presidential candidates to the same standard. Political leaders who hold the opportunity and the power to have stopped the Iraq War before it could get started and did nothing. They did nothing. America's current political leadership must not continue to avoid the obvious. Our presence in Iraq exacerbates the problem. 80% of the Iraqis want us out, and 70% think it's okay to kill American soldiers. We made a grave mistake. We should have the courage to admit it. We must bring our troops home now. Not 6 months from now, not a year, now. One more American death for our vital interest, it's not worth it. And we all know vital interest is a code word for oil. If we don't bring our soldiers home now, what will we tell the families of those killed and maimed between now and some future arbitrary date? The sooner we get out of Iraq, the sooner we can turn to the international community for diplomatic solutions to bring an end to the sectarian civil war that we caused. The Democrats in control of Congress need to act resolutely. And I'm not talking about some mealy-mouthed, non-binding resolution. They need to precipitate a constitutional confrontation with George Bush. Under the Constitution, the Congress is the only body that can declare war. Implicit in that power is the power to make peace, the power to end war. Even the commander-in-chief executing a war is subservient to the Congress's war powers. The Founding Fathers specifically created this constitutional check on the executive authority. And it was reaffirmed by the War Powers Act of 1973. Congress is our only hope to end this carnage before January 20th, 2009. Carnage and death that George Bush unleashed on the world. Our nation is in crisis. This crisis is greater than most people realize, and in some ways more significant than terrorism and the Iraq War. We have become a nation ruled by fear. Since the Second World War, various political leaders have fostered fear in the American people. Fear of communism, fear of terrorism, fear of immigrants, fear of people based on race and religion, fear of gays and lesbians in love who just want to get married, fear of people who are just different. It is fear that allows our political leaders to manipulate us all and distort our national priorities. Fear has allowed our political leaders to spend more on military armaments than is spent collectively by all the other nations in the world. Who are we afraid of? Are we that paranoid? Despite the trillions of dollars we spend on defense, the Bush Pentagon sent our soldiers into harm's way in Iraq without the proper body armor or sufficiently armored Humvees. And worse, the Bush administration plays games with the problems of our veterans, in effect waging a budget war against the only Americans who made sacrifices for George Bush's oil war. Shame on you, George Bush, letting the profits of arms contractors trump the needs of our veterans. President Eisenhower, upon leaving office, warned of the dangers to democracy posed by a military-industrial complex. Since his warning, we have seen a rise in the culture of militarism. His concern that our foreign policy might be dictated by the financial interest of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry has been fully realized. We should remember a lesson of the First World War. The presence of excessive weaponry in the hands of nation states by itself, all by itself, is sufficient to induce war. The decision to wage the preemptive war in Iraq raises the specter of much deeper problems facing the global community. Nuclear proliferation. On this issue, we should look to ourselves first. The U.S. has more deliverable nuclear devices than the rest of the world combined. One Trident nuclear submarine can hold the entire world hostage. Yet we continue to build more nuclear devices. Who in the world are we prepared to nuke? We started an arms race in space a decade ago, without provocation. Now the Bush administration is pressuring Eastern European countries to let us station anti-ballistic missiles on their soil. Most Americans are unaware that the Bush administration, under the cover of the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, has been aggressively initiating a new arms race with Russia and China, whose defense budgets are minuscule compared to ours. Our political leadership, controlled by military industrialists, insist on pursuing a Cold War strategy in a post-Cold War era. American politicians often boast of American exceptionalism. You've heard it from this dais. We are indeed a great nation, one that has made significant contributions to humanity. But our leaders are promoting delusional thinking when boasting that the United States and Americans are superior to the rest of the human race. We are no better than anybody else, and no worse. Unfortunately, the United States is not number one where it counts. There are only 2 industrialized nations in the world that do not provide health care for their citizens: the United States and South Africa. Despite spending more per capita on health care than any other nation in the world, we rank 37th for overall health performance. The United States ranks 49th in literacy. Time magazine last spring, on the cover, noted that 30% of our students do not graduate from high school, condemning them to a diminished economic existence. How can we ever compete in the world with that yoke around our neck? 30% don't graduate from high school.